Hi, what you're about to see is an interview with a vendor in the space in and around data mesh. We'd like to thank Nick Heudecker for graciously doing these interviews with vendors. We'd also like to make it clear that the data mesh community and data mesh learning doesn't necessarily endorse anything that these vendors are talking about, but that we wanted to give them a voice to talk about what they may offer in the space, so people are aware of vendors, because obviously if everybody has to build everything themselves, the data mesh is going to be pretty hard. So with that, we really thank Nick for doing this great work, and we hope that this is good and useful to you.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Data Mesh Vendor Interviews. I'm Nick Heudecker, Senior Director of Market Intelligence at Cribl. And I'm joined today with Jeremy Posner, who is the VP of Product and Solutions at Raw Labs. Jeremy, thanks for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, hi, Nick. Great to be here. I've been following the Data Mesh group for a while now, and I really like the concept as a whole. Definitely solves some key problems that I've seen in my time. Things like bottlenecks of central data teams and problems of over-centralizing the data.
Yeah, so how'd you get here? Like, tell me a little bit about your background.
So my background is not one of a software vendor at all. I've been a data practitioner, developer to architect and modeler for nearly 30 years now. Most of my career has been in financial services, working in some of the biggest banks in the world. Big international investment banks with huge systems, big budgets, sophisticated end users, and lots of data and lots of technologists. So for me, this is kind of going right to the other end, trying something new with a small software company in the data space. So that's where we are.
Great. I talked to a lot of financial services companies, and one thing is pretty consistent. They have everything, right? They have every product. They have open source. I'm curious to see, like, have you spoken with companies in the financial services space that are diving into the data mesh story?
Yeah, they are. In fact, I spent some time working at JP Chase a couple of years ago, and I know that they're an early adopter of data meshes, part of the organization. Remember, JP Chase is so big.
Massive organization.
Each of the divisions is like a mega corp in itself. So, they're adopting data mesh in one of the sort of 4 or 5 divisions, I believe. But yeah, there's a lot of activity in the financial services space because, they've got a lot of data and it's not very well connected. And my experience is that they copy the data around a lot. They copy it again and again and again. And then, of course, that leads to a lot of problems with, duplicated data and increased risk profiles because, how do you know what data is correct? And then they make incorrect decisions and all that kind of stuff. So the data mesh concept for me is very good because it puts your data back into the hands of the domain owners. And so then they're responsible for serving up, quality, trusted data, which is really what it's all about.
Yeah. It's increasingly evident that truth is relative, right? I'll create my own relative truth depending on what kind of problem I'm trying to solve. Hopefully, the data mesh idea gets us past that. I'll admit that I'm not familiar with Raw Labs. We had an intro call. We talked a little bit about, kind of where the company was. But break it down for me. What problem is Raw Labs trying to solve, and how does that fit into the data mesh story?
Yeah, so the origins of the company really is an interesting story because it's kind of like a small software company starting up. Not like most startups though, because the founders came from academia. One of the founders is an eminent professor of database systems. She leads the research team in the EPFL University. And she was previously at Carnegie Mellon as well. And then the other founder was actually one of her research students. He's now our CEO and our technical leader. And he worked at CERN on the Large Hadron Collider experiments, smashing tons of atoms together. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of sensors around that huge collider, and dealing with all that data was kind of a really difficult problem. And so when you've got data that's too big for databases, too complex for relational databases. Loading the data is a problem and querying it is even harder. So this is really kind of the origins of where they came from, is that they had to deal with petabytes of data like 10 years ago, and they didn't have the technology to be able to query it. And so the origins of the company is that there was effectively a query a problem that they tried to solve. When you're trying to query data of all types, not just flat relational data, but like data that's in complex log files, XML JSON structures, custom formats, multi-dimensional scientific data. And as you can imagine, that's a really hard problem to solve from a query point of view to be able to surface it. So that's really the origins of the company.
But that, I mean, while interesting, those are not enterprise use cases,
No.
right? I think, it's certainly in the logging space, which is where I sit at Cribl, in the observability data space. We see hundreds of terabytes a day for some of our clients, sometimes a petabyte. But I think most enterprise use cases are much smaller when it comes to data sets. The complexity of data is certainly there. But how does that translate? How does this kind of experience translate into effectively an enterprise software startup, right? Like
Yeah.
how are you translating those lessons?
Right. So we're using the query engine that was developed. So lots of sort of smart inventions in the query engine. We're using that query engine to be able to get at all of the data. And it doesn't have to be petabytes of data. It could be smaller data. But as you say, everybody's got a lot of complexity. There's a lot of heterogeneity out there. And we're using that as the centerpiece of our product to be able to create data APIs from all of that complex, messy data. We can surface APIs on top of that extremely quickly and with minimal fuss, so that you can go super fast from all of your messy data in different forms to a set of nicely curated APIs.
Okay. How does it work?
Okay, so with Raw Labs, you create a query. You wrap the query in a function that returns some data. So could be a simple SQL kind of statement, return some data. Then you create a file using YAML, the markup language, to basically configure the query. You say how the query runs, what resources it uses, what it returns, what security to apply, metadata to describe that API. And you take those and you commit those into GitHub, and then the API is ready. We have a synchronization process that syncs with your GitHub repo, pushes the code and the config through DataOps CI/CD process, and it deploys in seconds. And then it all runs in the cloud. We're a platform as a service, so we take care of all the infrastructure, and it's a fully containerized solution, so it's secure as well.
So what if I have data on-prem?
So if your data on-prem, you would have to create a bridge into your data on-prem, a secure connection. I mean, we're running at the moment as a platform as a service. So you'd either have to create the data bridge, or you'd have to upload the data into a data lake on like Amazon S3 or something like that.
Okay. If I've got data stored in multiple data stores that I want to create a data product for, do your query capabilities allow me to access multiple data stores in a single query?
Yes.
Or how would that work?
Okay, so with our flavor of SQL, we've basically abstracted all the different kind of databases and access mechanisms to get to data. So you write one query through our raw SQL, and that query is pushed down where necessary into databases, or if it's querying files or APIs, it will query those using our connected technology, and it'll bring all the data back and integrate it inside our engine, and then return it through the API. So you can query APIs just like databases. You can query files just like databases. And of course, any database type as well.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Who do you see? I think, so we're recording this in January. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned the product's coming out, I think GA in early February. Is that right?
Yeah. We're going to be we're going to be in GA sometime in the next few weeks. Yeah.
Okay. So who's your target profile? Like, what is your ideal customer profile, right? Your ICP, right? I work in marketing. We know that, all these TLAs for different acronyms. What does your ideal customer profile look like? Who are you selling to in an organization?
Yeah, so there's a few things here. I think you need to have most of your data on the cloud, so on the cloud platform, because we're a platform as a service. So if you're one of these companies that's still got your data on-prem, probably not right for us. I think one of the things that's really important to note is that because we are a kind of like a low code solution, although you don't have to be a low coder, we can appeal to companies that are struggling with data engineers. They don't have enough data engineers. In fact, I was just on a call with a company, they're a scale up. Everything's on AWS. They've got data everywhere. Their users are screaming for data in all of their different departments, but they don't have enough data engineers. So they need to be able to do more with less. So this is the key thing, is like, how do you do more with less? Well, you need to make it really easy for people. So our kind of strap line is like data delivery made simple. So we make it really simple for the user. You write SQL, you wrap it in with a config in YAML, and you commit it, and then your API is ready. So I think we're going for that kind of market. I come from financial services in the big banks, so I know how difficult it is to get a small technology solution into a big bank. It takes forever to get it through the security architecture and procurement, etc. So that's not our target audience.
Got it. So you're really looking at kind of like a citizen data engineer, right? You've got to have a certain amount of capability.
Yes.
Right. You have to know some SQL. You've kind of got to know where the data is. And then from there, you're hoping to expose that in an API.
Yes, I think you're right. A kind of citizen data engineer and upwards. I wouldn't say that data engineers don't go here. I think for us, data engineers look at what we have because it can make your life a lot easier. I think a lot of data engineers, I've spoken to a number of people running data engineering departments, and they spend a lot of time on infrastructure. They spend up to 50% of their time wrangling with infrastructure, and they just want to be able to, take the data and transform it and produce it, for their users. And I think we can help there as well.
Okay, so almost more of like a force multiplier for data engineers, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, being able to get things, yeah. I think most of the things that they do, while complex, are simple once they've dealt with the infrastructure. So maybe this is a way for them to deliver things faster. We've seen a lot of companies embrace data mesh either as a marketing term or something. We're going to provide a data mesh product. What makes Raw Labs unique in the data mesh space?
I mean, I would say that we're not a data mesh product. I don't think data mesh is a set of products. It's an architectural paradigm, and we can help you fit into that architectural paradigm because we are particularly good at being able to surface data as APIs, and then data as products, and APIs as products. So in that sort of data product space, we can play a good part. But I don't think for any minute we're the finished article. I don't think anybody could say that they are a data mesh platform, because it needs a number of different services, and that's me with my architecture hat on, and not with my working at a software company hat on.
Well, no, I think someone I was speaking with Kent Graziano from Snowflake, and he described data mesh as a socio-technical construct. Yes. Right. It's both, right? It's not a thing you can just write a check for.
Absolutely.
It's a thing you really have to design your organization around.
Absolutely,
as well.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
So you're currently, or well, not currently, but when you launch, you'll be cloud-based.
Yep.
What clouds can people find you in?
Initially, we're going to be in AWS because that's got most of the groundswell. And as demand dictates, we'll move over to Google and Azure So everything on our platform is fully automated. So it's just a question of doing the engineering pieces and shifting it all over. So it's like a highly automated data ops through and through platform. So yeah, so that's where we're going to be.
Okay. So we've talked about the product, we've talked about kind of the company, how it got here. Anything else you'd like to share about Raw Labs or about data mesh in general?
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed is that the problems that data mesh is trying to deal with are ones of kind of complexity. Complexity is our enemy, really. We've kind of solved the data volume problems, and to a certain extent the velocity problems, but the variety and the veracity problems, which is the complexity, that's what we're still struggling with. And the world's getting more complicated, not less, right? When I started, and probably when you started, everything was on-prem, and before that, it was all on mainframe. It was all kind of like nicely, compartmentalized. Even in the client-server days, we had a choice of 4 or 5 databases and a couple of tools to move and shift the data. Now, everything's exploded. There's thousands of technology vendors, and there's so many different types of database. So how do you deal with all that complexity? And I think what people want is they want solutions that help them deal with that complexity, simpler solutions that they can deliver quality data faster. So I think that's our line from Raw Labs into the data mesh. And I think that we can cut something there, because we've got some very interesting pieces of technology under the covers that help us do that slightly differently to other solutions. And of course, everybody's going more and more sort of CI/CD data ops, releasing more often, and being able to sort of test everything end to end. So I think there's
I'll push back on that, actually. I think people, they have this academic ideal that, like, oh, I need to be doing CI/CD, I need to be doing data ops, but often getting there is a much bigger challenge, right? And so they're like, oh, well, what does this really mean? Ultimately, I think if you talk to data engineers, you talk to maybe data consumers in an organization, they want these terms to do whatever they want to do, right? So they're like, I want you to enforce my context on all of this data, on all of these processes around it. And if it doesn't meet my context, right? Like, how do you trust data? I trust data if it supports my biases, right? If it doesn't, I have a hard time consuming that. So I think that there's still going to be some education involved here. Like, if it must fit my context, but I have to be able to share that context in a much more complex way.
Absolutely. Context
for me, that's where data mesh fits, right? It's that context sharing.
It is also being able to trace where the data comes from. It's all very well saying, here's an API, or here's a file, but you need to know what's behind it, because most data that people consume is kind of calculated, aggregated, secondhand data, etc. And people ask the questions, what's behind it? What's behind this? What's behind this? What's behind this? And they go all the way back. This is what data lineage is all about. Like, what's behind it? How do I know that this number is what I think it is and where it came from? So you need to be able to do that in an industrial manner. You need to be able to do that end to end. So in order to do that, a very good place to store that information is in somewhere like GitHub. Right? If you know all the configuration codes in GitHub, you can go and find and trace everything through. So that's really important. Doing things in loads of different tools is all very well, using the best of breed tools for everything, but you end up with an architecture with like 50 different tools in place. You need an army of engineers to be able to deal with that. And then when you ask the question, where did this all come from? It's really, really hard. You need to piece it all together, and you need a separate architecture for your catalogs and your metadata. And people aren't very good at that. So that's where they struggle. So
we live in a best of breed world, right? I mean, that is the reality. In my space, in like monitoring and observability, I have a slide that says, 56% of organizations or something have 30 or more monitoring tools. And I show that to people and they laugh. They're like, I wish I just had 30, you know? And when I was an analyst, I would talk to companies and they would say, I've got 24 data integration tools and I still have custom code.
Yeah.
Right. Like it is very much a best of breed world, and all the challenges come down to integration. I think that's a hill I'm going to die on. I think,
Absolutely.
right. It's always an integration problem.
I've been doing data integration for like 25 years, and I'll probably still be doing integration in another. Well, hopefully I won't be working in 25 years time. Hopefully I'll be retired.
We're all going to be working in 25 years.
In another 10 years.
A funny quote from a former colleague of mine is that everybody does data integration. If you copy and paste, you do data integration, which is pretty wide open. But no, it definitely interesting. So what is your launch date for Raw Labs? When can people find it?
So we're in beta right now. You can head over to raw-labs.com or raw-labs.com. You get an account for free. You can kick the tires. You can join our beta program. You get free credits. They'll be useful when we go into GA. You can also find demo data products that we have on GitHub. So github.com/raw-labs. And like I said, there's a free tier. There will always be a free tier, and we'll have pay-as-you-go and enterprise options. And so we look forward to getting people interested and looking at our products. Go over and check out our website and GitHub.
Awesome. Is there a community or anywhere that people can find and get kind of interactive support?
Yeah, we got Slack, and I can. I can't remember what the name of the Slack group is at the moment.
We'll send it over and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect.
When we post this up on YouTube. Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Folks, there you go. Jeremy Posner from Raw Labs.
Super. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great day.